Hello, BookTube. This is the first part of my September wrap-up. Considering that this has been an exceptionally busy month, it has actually been an exceptionally good reading month. I think I have finished 12 books already, maybe 11, but I think it's 12. This video is just going to be talking about the first 6, so let's get on with it. The first book that I want to talk about is Dolores Claiborne by Stephen King. Oh, I don't know what it is. I hit record and then my tongue does strange stuff. Anyway, this book follows, surprise, surprise, Dolores Claiborne. She is a housekeeper. She also murdered her husband, but that is not why the police are talking to her. Now, what I liked with this story was the structure. We read her police interview, sans the questions, which is very important, because if they were there, it would have been horribly repetitive. The fact that they were missing kept me intellectually engaged to a certain degree. I mean, don't get me wrong, you did not need to finish school to be able to work out what the questions were, but at least it gave me something to do while I was reading, which I enjoyed. Also, contrary to what one would expect with Stephen King, this is not a horror story. I've read some reviews where people say that there is a supernatural element in this, but I think one could even consider that a metaphor for guilt. But anyway, if you are curious and wanting to start off with Stephen King, this is probably a nice, good, safe place to start. You won't need holy water under the bed or Bibles surrounding your room. You'll just be able to read it and feel nice and safe. However, just be warned, you're going to be getting Stephen King in all his glory, so be warned, you will get crude language, etc., etc. Can't be helped. Anyway, keeping it in the family, the next book I picked up was this monstrosity, The Fireman by Joe Hill, Stephen King's son. Now, in this story, there is a plague that has broken out that causes people to spontaneously combust. These are the books that I read when I was really sick, by the way. I did not want to think too hard. And anyway, we follow a nurse. Her name is Harper Grayson, and she's been working with these patients, people suffering from this disease, until something happens. And then, just to add to the drama, she finds out that she has this disease just a handful of days after she finds out that she is pregnant. I have to give this book full marks for suspense. It has been many, many months, maybe even years, since I last read a book that kept me up until 3 o'clock in the morning, just as well I was booked off. The other thing that I had to appreciate with this was was the theory as to how society would respond to such an outbreak, to such a disease. Whether it's going to be accurate or not, who knows, but it was an interesting theory. I also liked the references that he made to pop culture, particularly Harry Potter. It gave me a nice, warm, familiar feeling. Although a little bit of me does wonder if it's just pure laziness. You know, let's make a reference that everybody will understand versus trying to make an original statement for oneself. The next book that I'm going to discuss is a difficult one to actually talk about. It is Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Now, I got this book many, many years ago when I was doing an A to Z reading challenge and I needed a Z. I really wanted Zen in the Art of Writing by Ray Bradbury because I'm a lot more interested in writing than I am in motorcycles or motorcycle maintenance. In fact, I can't think of many things that I'd be less interested in. But anyway, this book is basically a philosophy cushioned in a long motorbike trip with questions surrounding a ghost named Phaedrus. So there's 3 elements to this story, but mostly I felt that everything else was a disguise for the philosophy that he was giving. Now, there's a problem with me reading this book, and that is that I know some philosophy. My degree, and granted it was 22 years ago that I did this, but my degree is in philosophy and English literature. So knowing a little about this, or knowing a fair amount, or I feel like it's a little, I mean it's so long ago that I've forgotten more than I ever learned, but it made me aware that this was not as simple as he makes it out to be. If it was this simple, people would not still be debating philosophy. I mean, the debates have been going on for millennia. And if it was really as easy as he makes this out to be, it's admitting that the greatest minds of all time, or at least some of them, were really stupid. But while reading this book, it's very easy to forget this, because the narrator comes across with in a very convincing way. He has a lot of conviction to his arguments, and I would say in a lot of places his tone is very arrogant. And it's because of this that it's very easy to slip into the acceptance, well, into accepting what he is saying. I know that I did find some flaws with his premises, but to give a very good review of this, or to give a very good opinion of this, I would need to do research. And I'm sorry to say that that is not going to happen. I remember the struggle of reading The Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant, and I am not doing that again. There is more chance that I will volunteer for a double marathon in public than doing that again. And the chances of me running in public are zero, unless there is some kind of zombie apocalypse. And then they're slow. You don't need to run. You just need to be able to shoot straight. Anyway, I'm going to just leave you with a piece of advice with regards to this book, and that is, don't believe everything that you read. The next book that I'm going to talk about was fantastic. This is one of the top books that I've read this year. It is Michel Faber's The Crimson Petal and the White. When I was still in the early parts of this book, I thought that a nice way to describe the synopsis would be pretty woman in Victoria, England. However, I think that gives you the idea that this is a lot simpler and a lot sweeter smelling than it really is. This story follows Sugar, a prostitute, as she makes a connection with Playboy William Rackham. This has a spectacular cast. They walked off the page and into my mind, my imagination. They were alive while I read it. I love the way Michel Faber put the story across. There are parts where he talks directly to the reader, bringing us into the story as an unseen observer. He lets us into the minds of different characters, not at the same time. This isn't that kind of omniscient narrator. But you'll have sections with individual people giving their opinions. And sometimes it's a long time until you see somebody again. And I found myself having to rethink everything that I thought about them as I finally spent time in this person's head and got to understand them better. If that sounds remotely up your aisle, perhaps give it a try. I mean, it's only a book. If you don't like it, you can always put it down again. But that led me to pick up this, The Apple by Michel Faber. This is a collection of short stories relating to characters in Crimson Petal and the White. Now, if there was a flaw with The Crimson Petal and the White, it was the ending. It left me unsatisfied. I wanted more, a lot more, maybe another 800 pages more. So I was very happy that I already had The Apple on my shelf. Now, Michel Faber even tells you right there in the beginning, before he even starts with the stories, that this is not going to satisfy you if that is why you're reading it. So I suppose I went in knowing that I was going to be disappointed. But overall, there were only 3 of the short stories that I was interested in. The others I didn't really care for. And although it didn't answer any of the questions that I had, I was thankful that it left me with some form of a sense of closure. But in comparison to Crimson Petal and the White, The Apple was really a disappointment. It didn't have the same depth that I was looking for, but then could a short story really compete with the tome that preceded it? The last book that I'm going to talk about is The Hippopotamus by Stephen Fry. Now, I picked this up a couple of years ago because I read The Liar by Stephen Fry and absolutely loved it. And you know what it's like, you meet a writer that you love, and so you start buying other books. And then I got his memoir, More Fool Me, and he put me off the book. But enough time had passed that I could not remember what on earth he had said that had put me off this book. And currently I'm on a quest to try and deplete the TBR pile that I had at the start of January, which is getting rid of all the books that I've been having, well, that have been sitting on my shelf for the last couple of years or more. Some of them have been there for a couple of decades. Anyway, so I now know what scene it was that put me off. I'm going to, well, actually, let me just to give you a bit of a synopsis. In the story, we meet Ted. He is a poet past his prime, a failed and fired critic. Don't you love all these alliterations? But they give you enough of the feeling for the certain amount of distaste in this man's character. If you happen to be one of those readers that don't like a book because the protagonist is an unlikable character, then this book is not going to be for you. If you are a sensitive reader, then this book is not going to be for you. However, if you have a dark and twisted sense of humor, then you might thoroughly enjoy this. There were parts that were absolutely hilarious. There are some parts that are a bit disturbing. Overall, it is extremely well written. It is Stephen Fry. That man knows how to string a sentence together, and he's got glorious vocabulary. But yeah, I would be careful recommending this book. It is not going to be to everybody's taste. Some people might find it rather offensive, but it's up to you. I'm guessing that if you're watching this channel, chances are you're an adult, so you're more than keen to make up your own mind on this one. Wow, did I just say that out loud? I mean, that's just a given. Anyway, that is the end of part 1. Part 2 will be coming hopefully in just a handful of days, hopefully with 6 more books. And I'm just going to leave you there for now. Cheers!